Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about a book I read this week called Women and Power by Mary Beard. It's the first feminist book I've ever read, and the only reason I read it is because my mother gave it to me, and because it is very short. I think it's far too easy to dismiss feminism and to make fun of feminists based on what we see on online in articles and, of course, terrible feminist YouTube videos and vlogs and, the kind I mean. But I think that's somewhat strawmanning the argument of feminism by taking the weakest examples of feminists and arguing against them. So that's why I brought my mother on to talk to me about feminism, and that's why I read a book by Mary Beard, who is a rather acclaimed classics historian, and she's quite a smart lady, although I must say I disagree with a lot of what she said in Women in Power. The book is basically about the history of women's public speech. The story that's told in this book is about the development of women in the public sphere and how women are viewed as public speakers and decision makers by society at large, starting with the classics, with classic works of literature like the Odyssey and the Iliad, and how the Greeks and Romans looked at women and how they viewed women, and how they treated women, and bringing that back to modern times, talking about how women these days are treated and how they are listened to in public, or how they aren't, more pertinently. Her central claim in this book is that women are not respected as public speakers, and if women are to be respected, they have to pretend to be men, which again is a point that my mother brought up in our discussion in my previous video with her. To be fair to her, I think it's not a ridiculous theory to posit that perhaps there's a internal bias that an implicit bias that all people have, or most people have, against women as authoritative figures and public speakers. I don't think there's enough evidence in here or in general to prove that theory, but on the other hand, it's kind of hard to disprove as well, so I think she's not reaching too much, although some of the examples she gives are a little bit unconvincing for me. She talks about notable women who have had a voice in history and in modern times, such as Margaret Thatcher, and in mythology, such as Athena, and says that the women who have successfully had their voice heard are only listened to because they act like men, which I don't think is really accurate. She talks about how male voices are listened to as authoritative more than female voices, and how this is a result of sort of culture of programming that women are not to be listened to. I think she might be disregarding a more biological argument a little bit too much. I do think it's true that you're less likely to listen to someone or to respect the opinion of someone who is speaking very softly, very gently. You're less likely to think of their voice as one of authority. Now, this response, if it exists, I don't know if it is, this tendency to think of male and female voices differently, I can believe it, that those two things, that two people saying exactly the same thing, one in a female voice and one in a male voice, they might be viewed differently. But to say that this is due to social conditioning, I think, is overlooking a few different facts. One major thing that crossed my mind is the fact that a woman's voice sounds much more like a child's voice than a man's voice. So just by that fact, a woman is more likely to sound, even a very elderly woman, just having fewer deep tones and having just that sort of intonation just makes them sound slightly more infantile. They don't sound like children, they just sound more like children than men. And I think it's true of men, the ones that have deeper tones are more authoritative than the ones who have sort of more mid-tones or even high tones. Again, I haven't seen any research to show this, but it seems plausible to me. I also don't think that the bias against female voices compared to male voices is nearly as pronounced as the difference between accents. So someone with a sort of a higher class accent or a posh accent can sound much more informed, much more intelligent compared to someone with a lower class accent. That's not justified. There's no reason why someone who comes from Liverpool is less educated or less clever than someone who comes from Oxford, and yet I think that prejudice still remains. When you hear someone speaking in a strong regional accent, people are more likely to assume that you're less educated or that you're from a lower income family. Having a masculine versus a feminine voice is just one thing that can make you be perceived differently based on how you sound. And it's probably one of the more minor things that can be different about your voice. She also talks about how women who want to be respected in the workplace and in politics and in the public sphere have to dress as men to get that respect, which I think is not really accurate. I think women who wear trousers in public, and especially leaders of countries, the picture that was shown in here, Angela Merkel with Hillary Clinton, and noting how they're both dressed identically in sober black business suits and high heels with a sort of a 2-inch heel. They look quite uncannily similar in the way they're dressed. They kind of look like they planned their outfits out together. But to say whether that is being dressed like a man or just being dressed like a business person, I don't really want to see prime ministers wearing mini skirts or skirts down to the knee. It's just not. You just don't see it with women of a certain age. It's just not fashionable. Women's business suits, they accentuate parts of the body that make them look more feminine, not more masculine. Although in the 80s it was popular for women to have big shoulder pads. That's no longer the case, and business suits now accentuate the waistline and the hips in women, and men's business suits accentuate the upper body broadness. They're not. If women were dressing like men, I think they would be, like I said, in the 80s, wearing the big shoulder pads and trying to hide their hips and waistline to look more masculine. Or maybe they'd come out wearing combat boots and I don't know, model men wear. And aside from all of the details which I disagree with, and the main proposition that women are not being listened to in today's society, I think, is blatantly false. What came to mind immediately was Emma Watson speaking at the UN about feminism. Feminists are being listened to on a huge scale. It seems that everyone is tripping over themselves to give women a voice these days. Emma Watson is not. She's no one. She's an actress, and she's read some books by Sylvia Plath. There's no way that Daniel Radcliffe is ever going to be allowed to speak at the UN talking about men's rights. That's never going to happen. Aside from the fact that I don't believe Daniel Radcliffe is a men's rights activist. Even if he was, I don't think he'd ever get a platform at the UN. Women are being listened to, and they're being listened to partly just because they're women, in some circumstances, I think. YouTube is now a huge medium on it by itself, and it's being used a lot to talk about politics and being used to discuss ideas, and for whatever reason, women are being noticed a lot on YouTube. Female YouTube channels are getting a lot of attention. That's not to say that male channels are not doing well. Of course they are. The very top YouTube channels are still occupied, are still made by men, but as someone starting out on YouTube, I think your prospects are much better if you're a woman. Being a woman just gives you sort of plus points, and that goes for attractive women and unattractive women. It's just slightly more. It makes a more interesting thumbnail to click on, especially if you're talking about right-wing politics or even centrist politics or anti-SJW stuff. People just see, oh, a woman thinks this? I'm there. I'm interested. Which isn't to say these women aren't talented. it seems that people on YouTube, men and women, although especially men, are just more likely to click on a thumbnail if it's of a woman, and especially if it's an attractive woman, and especially if it's an attractive woman with some cleavage showing. And that doesn't mean they're watching it for sexual gratification, because, as we all know, there's other places on the internet that you can go for that sort of thing. What they are interested in is certain opinions that they already hold, or certain ideas that they're interested in listening to, being spoken through the mouthpiece of a woman. I don't know why. Maybe you could talk to me about that, since most of you watching are men, and you're subscribed to my channel. Female YouTubers who are just starting their channels, get a leg up for that. And I don't think it's YouTube's recommending algorithm. I think it actually is people clicking on these videos more because they want to see women speaking about things like this. They want to see a woman talking about things they can agree with. I often see after some notable woman has said something stupid that day, that she will get a lot of mean tweets, but the tweets aren't just mean, they're mean in a very specific way that it's misogynistic, for lack of a better word. It's specifically commenting on her unattractiveness, calling her mean female-specific names that I won't repeat here, because this is a family-friendly channel, and sort of describing her various body parts in very unfavourable ways. And that's not to say that men get any better treatment online, but I think the flavour of it is a little bit different. And I think women who are in the public sphere, women who are in the public eye, do sort of just have to put up with that. And it is a shame, and it is hard. It's I think it is enough to discourage a lot of women from wanting to be active on the internet. There is a small pocket of people, I think men, although I don't know, who like to say very mean and disgusting things about women on the internet, and that's not all men, and it's not all people. It's just trolls, right? They just, for some reason, they're very upset, bitter people. They want to make this woman feel bad about herself, or feel like she's in danger, or just be upset. They want to upset someone, so they say the most disgusting thing that can come to mind. And I don't think men get that very specific kind of abuse as much, although I don't have any evidence to support this. So anyway, I won't specifically recommend this book, although if you fancy reading some feminist literature that isn't complete trash, then maybe check out Women in Power. It's very short, and it's easy to read, and it's got a lot of good pictures in it, and some good facts about ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Thank you for watching, and I'm sure you will let me know how much of a feminist you think I am in the comments section.